After my husband destroyed the Southern Jin dynasty, he made my sister his slave. Someone around me said to me, she had humiliated His Majesty, and His Majesty does not want her to die too easily. I smiled. They don't know that my husband has already fallen deeply in love with her. That night when he was making love with me, he made my sister kneel outside and serve him. He thought this was revenge against her. I pretended not to understand and watched their show quietly. Later he asked me like a madman why I would rather die than leave him. I stroked his eyes and said, because you are no longer like him. 01. When Wei Yuanka came to my bedroom, Li Xiaoning followed him. She lowered her brows and eyes, showing a gentleness that I had never seen before. When Wei Yuanka entered the city yesterday, she was threatening to jump off the city wall, sacrificing her life for her country and refusing to surrender. But today, she has become his personal servant in the palace. Death is always scary. I didn't say much and had dinner with Wei Yuanka. Li Xiaoning tested poison and served food for him. These were jobs that were previously done by eunuchs, but now it was undoubtedly a humiliation for a princess like her to do it. Wei Yuanka didn't even look at her. He just kept asking me to eat more. He also said that I was too thin now, and my waist was so thin that he could hold it with one hand. He seldom talks to me so much. He said these words deliberately for Li Xiaoning to hear. He repaid her contempt and humiliation by showing concern for me. Li Xiaoning's eyelashes trembled slightly, and the white jade meatball on the chopsticks fell to the ground, which immediately attracted a scolding from the eunuch beside Wei Yuanka. Wei Yuanka did not stop me and even personally served me a bowl of soup. When we were in bed, he almost swallowed me up, pressing me down and forcing me to say sweet words begging for mercy. Shuiwei, please me. He bit my neck and called my name for the first time. He used to call me Jin Fei, but when he was confused and infatuated, he would call me Xiaoning. Li Xiaoning and I look about 70% similar, so when Li Xiaoning was reluctant to go to Northern Zhou for marriage 5 years ago, my father asked me to take her place. The Northern Zhou were not fools. They wanted a legitimate princess, but I was not one of them. Southern Jin broke the contract, and I was thrown into the military camp that day. There was a long queue outside the military tent that day, and the soldiers all wanted to taste the princess of Southern Jin. However, the first person to come in was Wei Yuanka. After not seeing him for 5 years, he was no longer as thin and frail as when he was a hostage in Southern Jin. He was now a strong and ferocious tiger and wolf of Northern Zhou. But he didn't remember me. He looked at my face and covered my eyes. Because my eyes are not like Li Xiaoning's. 02. I looked at the brocade tent above my head, followed Wei Yuanka's wishes, and sobbed and begged, Your Majesty, please have mercy on me. But he felt it was not enough, so he pinched my chin and made me beg him again and again until he was satisfied. At this time, Li Xiaoning was kneeling outside, and she could hear it clearly. In the past, I also knelt outside and watched Li Xiaoning punish Wei Yuanka. Wei Yuanka was the eldest son of the Northern Zhou royal family. He was sent to Southern Jin as a hostage at the age of 7. Li Xiaoning often gathers these protons together. She has a gladiatorial arena. These protons are her beasts. She holds a gladiatorial meeting every month. The winner can have dinner with her, and the loser will be beaten and forced to kneel. Before the age of 15, Wei Yuanka always lost and was punished with bruises all over his body. But suddenly one day, he won every game and never lost again. Mu Nanha whispered to me. He used to lose on purpose just to avoid having dinner with the princess. I was curious at the time. Why does he keep winning now? Mu Nanha looked at me with a bright smile and said, Because he fell in love with the princess. My princess always punishes him. How can he like her like this? I was puzzled. Mu Nanha was still smiling. There is no reason for liking someone, just like you hide when you see me, but I still want to see you. My face suddenly turned red. This scene happened to be seen by Li Xiaoning. I was slapped, and Wei Yuanka, who won the Beast Fighting Club, was also whipped by her. That day, Wei Yuanka and I knelt in the rain together, and I never saw him again. 03. Wei Yuanka and I spent the whole night together and didn't get up until the morning. I curled up exhausted under the quilt, and he returned to his indifferent state. When he left, he told the palace servants to serve me well and that he would come back to have dinner with me in the evening. When he walked past Li Xiaoning stood up to follow him. He said coldly, "You served the noble concubine today. You don't need to follow me. I've been married to him for 5 years, but now he has only made me a concubine." The position of Empress Dowager was vacant, and anyone with a discerning eye knew that it was reserved for someone else. Li Xiaoning should know this too. How could a princess who is supported by the Southern Jin dynasty with all its national strength not see through Wei Yuanka's inner thoughts? So as soon as Wei Yuanka left, she immediately stood up and walked towards me with the same arrogance as before. "You lowly bastard, you don't think I will really serve you, do you?" She was a legitimate princess of the imperial palace, while I was born to a daughter of Wu Yu who was a tribute to Southern Jin.
She has always looked down on me.
I sipped my tea slowly. "You knelt outside all night last night and you're exhausted. Even if you want to serve me, I am afraid you can't do it well." I looked down on her, but she didn't mind. "Do you know that His Majesty actually?" She hesitated to speak, pretending to be profound. I know what she wants to say. She wants to say that Wei Yuanka still likes him, and I am just her substitute. So, she pretended to jump off the city wall yesterday to let the people of Southern Jin know her righteousness. In this way, when she and Wei Yuanka renew their marriage in the future, the people will think that she has no choice, and she will not be labeled a traitor like me. I didn't respond to her question, but only asked her, "Where are the bodies of my mother and Nanha now?" She was stunned for a moment, and then she looked angry. "Don't mention Mu Nanha to me." 04. When I was 17, Nanha became my married man. After my father chose me as his replacement, he cancelled my engagement with him. On the day I went north, he escaped from his residence and caught up with a convoy. When we got close, he was held down by the guards. The young general who had once taken great pleasure in taking revenge now knelt on the ground in a rage, but his eyes remained firm. "Shuiwe, stay alive. I will definitely come and take you home." He also shouted at the 1,000 tribute girls who followed me north, "You all need to stay alive. I, Mu Nanha, will definitely come to take you home." I leaned half of my body out of the window, tears streaming down my face. "Okay, I'll wait for you." The first year, no news. The next year, nothing either. In the third year, he died. People from Southern Jin said that half a year after my marriage, he became Li Xiaoning's concubine. In the third year of the marriage, my father passed away. He helped his fourth brother, who advocated war, to fight for the throne, but failed. Both of them were executed prematurely. Because my mother pleaded for them in front of a new emperor, she was hit on the head by a golden melon and died tragically in front of the palace. The whereabouts of their remains are still unknown. They have never appeared in my dreams. I guess it's because Southern Jin and Northern Zhou are too far away, so far that even my soul cannot reach them. After that year, I became a demon concubine. Not only did Wei Yuanka give me a status, but he also asked him to take me with him even when he went to war. After Li Xiaoning's anger subsided, he suddenly laughed. "Yesterday, I saw Wei Yuanka and found that he was somewhat similar to Mu Nanha, especially his eyes. Why didn't I notice it before? Li Shuiwei, I heard you show no shame when you were being pampered last night. Did you mistake Wei Yuanka for Mu Nanha?" I said calmly, "Tell me where their bodies are, and I will tell you whether I mistook His Majesty for Nanha." Now, the palace is full of people from the Northern Zhou dynasty, so I can only get information from Li Xiaoning first. Li Xiaoning didn't tell me the location of the body in the end. She said she didn't know. She said, "Even if I knew, I would not tell you. Mu Nanha is my concubine. He is mine in life and in death." I nodded and let her clean the hall inside and out by herself. Wei Yuanka kept her with me because he wanted to use me to temper her temper, so I just went with the flow. 05. Wei Yuanka arrived on time in the evening, and the same thing happened as last night. He and I were having fun in the tent, while Li Xiaoning was kneeling outside. During the day, he made her do all sorts of rough work, and her white jade-like hands soon became rough. Both of them played the game of playing hard to get to the extreme, just waiting to see who would surrender first. In the end, it was Li Xiaoning who gave Wei Yuanke the stage first. She broke a jade cup and knelt in the snow as punishment. No matter how the palace maids tried to persuade her to do so, she refused to get up. When Wei Yuanke came, she fainted. Wei Yuanke panicked and immediately carried her to the bed, and all the imperial doctors on duty in the palace were called. The palace servants gradually discovered the clues. I heard them talking. "I thought your majesty was humiliating the princess of southern Jin. Why do I feel something is wrong now?" "You don't understand, right? Your majesty has been making Princess Nanjing jealous a few days ago. I heard that your majesty liked her when she was a hostage here."
Ah,
"What about concubine Jean? They are sisters." It would be great if concubine Jean had a child, but unfortunately, despite her exclusive favor, there is no sign of pregnancy. I'm afraid concubine Jean will fall out of favor. My personal maid Xiaonian couldn't stand it anymore and scolded me. "How dare you talk about the imperial concubine? Do you want to die?" Indeed, I was the only one who was spoiled during these 5 years, but I didn't have any children. I was pregnant twice, but both times I had miscarriages. The imperial physician of the Northern Zhou dynasty said that it was because of my cold body and asked me to take good care of my body. I know that Wei Yuanke doesn't want me to give birth to his child, just like he doesn't want to give me the position of queen. But it doesn't matter. I couldn't ask for more. Otherwise, when I meet my mother and Nanha in the future, if I have a child with my enemy, I don't know how to explain it. 06. Li Xiaoning had a high fever and spoke nonsense all night. One moment she said her father was here to pick her up, the next moment she got up and said she wanted to go out and fly a kite. He also said that he bullied Wei Yuanke when he was young just to get his attention, and that he did not go to the Northern Zhou dynasty to marry because he had smallpox at that time and was afraid of scaring people. Wei Yuanke's expression gradually softened, and he personally brought the medicine to feed her. Li Xiaoning couldn't swallow it and vomited it out, and the medicine bowl was knocked over. The strong smell of medicine made me feel sick, so I hurried outside and started vomiting. Xiao Nian immediately took out the fox fur coat and put it on me, and then took my pulse. "My lady, please don't catch a cold." She is one of the few tribute girls I could save. She knows some medical skills and is loyal to me. She took his pulse and said with joy, "My lady, you are 2 months pregnant now." I immediately covered her mouth. She was 2 months pregnant, and she got pregnant the night she captured Yulo Pass. Yulo Pass was the last line of defense of southern Jin, and Wei Yuanke was filled with lust that night. This child is also very stubborn. He did not fall behind during the march. I've been taking care of him in bed for the past few days, and nothing happened to him. I told Xiaonian, "Don't tell anyone about this. Please prepare the medicine for me." Xiaonian couldn't bear it. "My queen, if you lose this baby, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to get pregnant again in the future." Wei Yuanke came out at this time and asked me, "What's wrong?" I replied, "Nothing. The charcoal fire in the hall was too strong and it was a bit stuffy, so I came out to get some fresh air." He didn't believe it and reached out to feel my pulse. When he was held hostage in the Southern Jin dynasty, he and the people around him were treated harshly and could only heal themselves, so he also learned medical skills. But Li Xiaoning was crying in the hall. He asked Xiaonian to take good care of me and turned to go to Li Xiaoning. A few days later, Li Xiaoning was conferred the title of beauty and lived in Zhaoyang Palace, where her mother once lived. She said that she grew up there and all these were memories, so she asked Wei Yuanke for permission. Wei Yuanke agreed. The palace ladies were all observant and knew what Li Xiaoning moving into Zhaoyang Palace meant. Wei Yuanke had not set foot in my palace for half a month, and rumors began to spread that I had fallen out of favor. As a result, I became short of food, clothing, and other daily necessities, and I sent all the good things to Li Xiaoning. Xiaonian originally wanted to use osmanthus to help me get an abortion, but she couldn't get it, and was even humiliated by Li Xiaoning's people. But this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that the officials of the previous dynasty, both in the north and south, united for the first time in asking Wei Yuanke to execute me. To southern Jin, I am a traitor. To the northern Zhou dynasty, I am a demon concubine. I must die.
But I can't die. 07.
Faced with the requests of officials from the previous dynasty, Wei Yuanke hesitated. The palace maid said that he had me in his heart, and even if I was just a substitute, after 5 years of love, he would definitely not be willing to let me go. Wei Yuanke finally came to see me, drinking one glass of wine after another. I looked into his eyes the whole time we were having sex. Li Xiaoning was right. His eyes did look very much like Nanha's. When he was the first to enter the military tent that day, I was about to bite my tongue to commit suicide, but I gave up. Nana told me to live well, and he would come to take me home. I thought Wei Yuanke still remembered me, so I told him that I was Li Shuiwei and begged him to save me. But he looked at me indifferently. He didn't remember me. After all, Li Xiaoning was so dazzling. He asked me, "Why doesn't Li Xiaoning want to come?" I didn't know how to answer him, and the atmosphere was very depressing. After a while, he asked again, "Is it she is afraid of the cold?" I quickly followed his words. "Well, she is most afraid of the cold." That night he took me back to his tent, covered my eyes with his hands, and said, "I will take you home." Now, he has done what Nanha failed to do, in the most cruel way. "What are you looking at?" He was unhappy with my distraction. I came out of my memory, reached out and stroked his eyes, saying affectionately, "Your eyes are so beautiful, like the stars in the sky." But he didn't know Nanhexing, he just thought I was trying to please him. He kissed me and said, "If you hurt anything, don't take it to heart, I will take care of it." I responded. Finally, his hand slid to my waist and abdomen. "You have become a little plump, and I can no longer hold you with one hand. Take care of yourself and give me a child." He is lying. When Li Xiaoning was not by his side, I couldn't even give birth to his child. So how could he suddenly show mercy to me now that he is back? He should have given me a date, and then a slap in the face. Sure enough, he said that in order to appease the previous dynasty, he would demote me from a noble concubine to a concubine. Changing clothes is only higher than that of slaves. I think this is what Li Xiaoning asked for. She has been a slave, so I must be a slave too. Wei Yuanke might really be reluctant to let me go, but not that much. The next time the previous dynasty wants me to die, I'm afraid I won't be able to survive. 08. The next day, I took the initiative to find the Queen Mother and said, "I am willing to die to relieve the Queen Mother and your Majesty of their worries." The Queen Mother would naturally not refuse. If I took the initiative to ask for death, Wei Yuanke would not be in trouble, and I would also have an explanation to the court officials. I put forward 2 conditions. For the sake of decency, I only take poison. After I die, I must be buried with my mother. I want to use the Queen Mother's hand to complete my plan of leaving. The Queen Mother nodded and said, "Okay, I will agree to everything you say, but I don't think it's appropriate to tell your Majesty about the suicide in advance." I replied respectfully, "Yes." In order to make me die sooner, the Queen Mother immediately sent people to find my mother's body. As long as I find my mother, finding Nanha will be easy.
09.
After being demoted to a locker room, I was arranged to live in Haitang Pavilion where my mother once lived. The museum is not big, but I heard that the crabapple tree is still alive. That crabapple tree was planted by my mother herself in the first year she came to Nanjing. When I was a child, I nestled in my mother's arms and listened to her tell stories about her motherland, Wuyu. She said there was a vast and boundless ocean over there, connecting all 9 continents, and that she could go to very far places. Her dream had once been to go to sea with her father and meet the legendary blue-eyed, golden-haired stranger. Unfortunately, we lost his country. I entered the begonia pavilion and saw that the begonia tree that had just sprouted had been cut into several sections. I went to look for Li Xiaoning. She was entertaining the noble ladies of the Southern Dynasty. The palace was filled with flowers, and the warm breeze was intoxicating. Facing my questioning, she generously admitted, "I had it cut down. That tree is my enemy. Isn't it just a tree? It's not your biological mother." The ladies also smiled and agreed. I didn't say anything much. I just brought the hot tea and poured it on Li Xiaoning's head. She jumped up screaming and asked the palace maids to beat me to death on the spot. If you kill her now, it will help His Majesty relieve his worries, and the officials of the former dynasty will support you. I pulled out the dagger and put it directly to her neck. Before that, I will definitely pull you up to cushion my back. The dagger was given to me by Wei Yuanka. It was so sharp that it could cut through iron like mud. It broke a layer of skin on her neck just by touching it. She and I are sisters. We should be singing and dancing under the willow trees in the courtyard and swinging like sisters among the flowers. But we ended up becoming enemies. Wei Yuanka was quickly alarmed, and he ordered in a cold voice, "Put down the dagger." I shook my head. She destroyed my mother's begonia. I want her to admit her mistake and apologize. Wei Yuanka approached me step by step. It's just a tree, Li Shuyue. Don't go too far. Too much. I smiled. Your Majesty seems to have really forgotten that you almost lost your life due to a cold that year, but the roots of this crabapple tree saved your life. When he was 15, he caught a strange cold, and even the imperial doctors in the palace were helpless. Although Nanjing treated him harshly, they could not let him die. My father then recruited many famous doctors to treat him. In order to make an impression on me in front of my father, my mother volunteered to go. She dug up the roots of the crabapple tree, boiled some medicine for Wei Yuanka to drink, and boiled water for him to take a bath. At that time, he was too unconscious to drink the medicine, so my mother asked me to pinch his nose, saying that this would make him open his mouth by himself. I did as he asked, but he opened his eyes halfway, pressed me down on the bed, and opened his mouth to bite my throat like a wolf. My mother quickly grabbed him and explained to him that we were there to treat him, and then he fell asleep again. Mother said, "This child is pitiful. Even though he is so sick, he is still so vigilant. He must have suffered a lot in the past." Later, he recovered from his illness. My mother was named a beauty for her meritorious service, and my father finally remembered that he had a daughter like me. Now I expected Wei Yuanka to stop blocking me, but he said, "What nonsense are you talking about?" He knocked my dagger away, held Li Xiaoning in his arms, and punished me by grounding me to house arrest for a month. Just then, the Queen Mother arrived.
10.
The Queen Mother came, bringing with her the ashes of my mother, fourth brother, and Nanha. Li Xiaoning and I were both shocked. What surprised me was that the Queen Mother had clearly said that Wei Yuanka should not be informed of this matter. So why did she come to me openly? What is she going to do? As for Li Xiaoning, she was now trembling all over, obviously afraid. I forced myself to remain calm and wait and see what would happen. The Queen Mother said that the ashes were found in a soul-calming well on a barren mountain in Tiandu City. No wonder I couldn't get any information. It turns out it was in the soul-calming well. Li Gengyi, this is your mother. The Queen Mother handed me a porcelain bottle covered with runes. I took it tremblingly and held it tightly in my palm. The Queen Mother handed another one to Li Xiaoning. Lady Li, this is your ex-husband, Mu Nanha. Li Xiaoning's face turned pale. Empress Dowager, what are you doing? When a person dies, the debt is cancelled, and the relationship between husband and wife naturally no longer exists. The Queen Mother smiled and said, "A day of marriage brings 100 days of love. I heard that his entire family was exterminated. After all, he was once a noble family. It's okay for you to dispose of his ashes." I understand now. The Queen Mother is not here to go back on her word. She is here to deal with Li Xiaoning. It seems that in her heart, Li Xiaoning is the biggest threat. Yes, the Southern Jin princess who would rather die than surrender, such a popular princess. If she wanted to harm the Northern Zhou in the future, she would be in trouble if she could not get support from everyone. Li Xiaoning, you've dug a big hole for yourself. Li Xiaoning immediately knelt down in front of Wei Yuanka and said, "Your Majesty, Mu Nanha and I are husband and wife in name only, not in reality. I am still a virgin, and I will allow myself to be examined now. I am also a victim. After their rebellion failed, I was almost implicated." After saying that, She pointed at me and said, "Moreover, Mu Nanha didn't really want to marry me. He just wanted to use me to make friends with the court officials to attack the Northern Zhou dynasty and save Li Shuiwe. He and Li Shuiwe are also engaged, so the ashes should be given to her." Wei Yuanke looked up at me and said, "Really? You guys were engaged? Why have I never heard you mention it?" I replied, "Because it's all in the past." The Queen Mother still gave me the ashes of Nanha and my fourth brother. Finally, she took one look at my belly and said, "Guilty." 11. Wei Yuanke took Li Xiaoning away. After 5 years, I can finally sit quietly with my mother, my brother, and the people I love. I stroked the small porcelain bottle that contained them and whispered, "I thought you couldn't come to see me because the distance was too far. It turns out that you can't come. Are you also blaming me for finding you now?" They didn't say anything, only the gentle breeze brushed across my face, taking away the tears on my face. While tidying up the room, Qiu Nian said that Wei Yuanke was magnanimous. If it were in the past in southern Jin, men would definitely not accept that their women had anything to do with other men. As he was speaking, Zhao Jiu, the eunuch beside Wei Yuanke, came and Wei Yuanke asked him to take away the ashes of my fourth brother and Nanha. Zhao Jiu said, "Your Majesty, they are officials of the previous dynasty, so let's leave them to the court to deal with." I nodded and said, "Eunuch Zhao, can you let me take some of their ashes? After all, they are my relatives and old friends. I can still pay my respects to them during festivals." Zhao Jiu hesitated for a moment, but finally agreed. I took the brocade bag, put their ashes in it, and put them into my mother's urn. Qiu Nian knelt down respectfully in front of them. I looked at her, and after thinking for a while I decided not to tell her my plan to rescue the golden cicada. She is a very honest person and can act. It would be troublesome if her performance was not genuine after my death. I gave her a golden bag and asked her to hang it in the palace or temple on the 15th day of next month to pray for blessings. She accepted it without any doubt. After she fell asleep, I took out the poison given by the Queen Mother, swallowed it, and then lay down holding the urn. The Queen Mother's poison is called acacia, which will paralyze the body after taking it until the person stops breathing. There will be no pain, just like sleeping. I had a dream. In the dream, I saw my mother standing under a crabapple tree and smiling happily. She took off her southern Jin palace dress and put on a clean and neat set of men's clothes. "Shuiwe, Mother wants to go overseas to have a look. Mom, take me away." I ran towards her, but accidentally fell. A strong hand lifted me up. It was my fourth brother, who frowned every day. "Shuiwe, a princess should act like a princess. Didn't you have enough food to eat? You even stumble when you walk." Another young man's voice was heard. It was Mu Nanha. He hooked his arm around his fourth brother's shoulder and asked, "What does not eating have to do with walking?" The fourth brother said, "Have you not seen those beggars in the city? If they don't eat, their legs will become weak, and if their legs become weak, they will fall down." Nanhi thought for a moment and said, "Yes, the fourth prince is indeed concerned about the country and the people, and is very observant." The two young men walked forward arm in arm. I desperately stretched out my hands to them. Take me away, brother Nanha?" But they didn't answer me. Finally, I was picked up and turned around to see Wei Yuanke. He conquered Yulo Pass, covered my eyes with his hands, and said, "We will settle down in southern Jin from now on, and you will never feel cold again." I pushed him away with all my strength and said I didn't want to go back like this. "Princess, princess." Many familiar voices are calling me. I suddenly opened my eyes and saw Chunyao's face. The princess is woken up, finally woken up. Chunyao cried with joy. Chunyao is also the tribute girl I rescued.
12.
I came back to life, 7 days after my death. Chunyao and the other 6 tribute girls looked at me nervously.
"We are in and now."
My body was originally in a temple, and they set a fire to burn the place where my body was kept. Chunyao handed me my mother's urn, and I held it tightly in my arms. "Don't worry, princess. The female corpse we are looking for is almost identical to you." And Qiu Nian desperately tried to put out the fire, crying heartbrokenly, No one suspected it. His Majesty was there too. Luckily, the house collapsed at that time, so he couldn't get in. Why are you bringing up irrelevant people for no reason? Chunyao interrupted them and brought me some porridge. I took a sip, and my throat started to hurt. After all, it was the poison that the Queen Mother had given me to kill me. Even if I took the antidote in advance, it would still cause damage to my body. The antidote was given to me by Nanha before I went to Northern Zhou for marriage 5 years ago. He said it was a secret medicine from their Shilling City that could cure all kinds of poisons, but excessive dosage would put one in a state of near death. At that time, he asked me to take it and then quietly took me back to Shilling City. We will stay away from all disputes and live happily forever. I agreed to his request, but then I told his father about his plan and locked him up in the house. Shilling City is too clean, and the children raised there have no idea how terrible the Nanjing Tiancheng is. I sealed the pill with wax and kept it with me as a reminder. I looked at this group of girls wearing coarse clothes. Some of them had broken hands, some were blind, and some had disfigured faces. When we went to the Northern Zhou, we thought they would treat us well because the Southern Jin had never tortured or abused tribute daughters. We thought that everyone would either become palace maids or be awarded to ministers as concubines. It was not until everyone was driven to the Northern Zhou camp that we realized we had fallen into the mouth of a jackal. Mu Nanha told us to live well and said he would come to take us home. Not only did I listen to it, but the girls listened to it too. We waited and waited, but he never showed up. I also asked them, "Do you hate him? If it weren't for him, maybe you wouldn't have to persist for so long." They smiled and said, "Why should we hate someone who died for us?" I closed the eyes of many of them myself. Later, Wei Yuanka became emperor, and I immediately asked him to issue an order to allow these tribute girls to leave the camp. But there are not many people left. Up to now, including Qiu Nian, there are only 8 people alive. Chunyao brought a pair of 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, to see me. I held them in my arms and they whispered to me, "Auntie, this is my 4th brother's child, who was rescued by one of his conspirators who tried his best. During the time when Wei Yuanka captured Yulo Pass, this conspirator found me, and it was also at that time that I made a plan to leave. I touched my belly, and I wondered if this baby that shouldn't have come was still there." 13. The next day we set off for Wuyu. My mother told me that there was an island called Donglu a few hundred miles east of Wuyu. Although it was part of the Southern Jin territory, it was so remote that it was almost forgotten. I want to take everyone to live there. After we arrived in Wuyu, we stopped to wait for Qiu Nian. She would definitely come to find us after seeing the contents of the treasure bag. Although the Northern Zhou dynasty had unified the world, Wuyu was located in the easternmost part and did not have much Northern Zhou influence at the moment. My mother taught me Wuyu. I was the one who went out to buy things on weekdays, and no one knew that I was from Tiancheng. But my belly was getting bigger and bigger, and the baby was still alive and well. I went to the clinic to buy medicine for falling off the stool, but the clinic didn't sell it. They said that due to years of war, 9 out of 10 houses were deserted, and abortions were no longer allowed in the government. "Madam, judging from your current pulse condition, if you force an abortion, you may suffer from hemorrhage." The old doctor, who was examining my pulse, reminded me. I went to buy osmanthus flowers again, but they had also been eaten up by the hungry people. It seemed that everyone was trying to stop me from aborting this child. I can only wait until Qiu Nian comes before making any plans. 10 or so days later, Qiu Nian finally arrived. She cried breathlessly in my arms. "Princess, you are really still alive." I comforted her and asked her to stop calling me princess and to call me Su Xiaohe from now on, which was the name my mother once gave me. She cried for a while and said, "Princess Xiaohe, it's a good thing you escaped. His Majesty didn't shed a single tear after you died. If you stayed there and the court officials asked him to kill you, he would definitely not hesitate. Everyone says you committed suicide because you were angry with His Majesty. Li Zhaoning is so happy. I really want to poison her to death. She is the princess who enjoys all the support from the whole world, but we have to suffer all the hardships. Only the Queen Mother was kind to you. She performed a ritual for you and your mother. The Queen Mother doesn't like me. She didn't perform the ritual for me. She performed it for the baby in my belly. I don't know when she found out, and it doesn't matter. 14. I paid a lot of money to charter a boat to Donglu Island. As the ship left the port, I looked back at the vast land. I thought that the declining times were passing by quickly, and life was just like a dream. Never again. 15. Seeing Wei Yuanka again was the third year since we arrived at Donglu Island. By then, we had already settled down in Donglu Island. We opened a cloth shop, and our life was relatively stable. Although the scenery here is pleasant and the resources are abundant, where there are people there are disputes, and we outsiders also live our lives cautiously. The baby in my belly was finally born, and Qion Yan said the same thing as the old doctor, that the pregnancy was not born after all. The child is a boy. He looked like me at first, but as he grew older, he looked more and more like Wei Yuanka. I didn't pay much attention to him. It was Qion Yan who took care of him. Qion Yan named him Xiaofei, saying that it means flying freely. He seemed a little stupid, always playing alone in silence, and only recently learned to speak. Qion Yan said that this was due to his slow speech. Wei Yuanka came unexpectedly. At that time, I was in the cloth shop talking to the young master of the Zhang family, a wealthy family in the city. He said that he liked a girl and wanted to give her a nice set of clothes and asked me to help him choose. I was recommending it to him when out of the corner of my eye I saw Qion Yan suddenly kneel on the ground, while Chun Yao beside him stepped back in fear. Wei Yuanka walked into the cloth shop, wearing a black robe, and looked at me coldly. After not seeing him for 3 years, he didn't look much different. He looked aloof and reserved, more like an almighty emperor. I don't know how he got across the sea, nor do I know how he knew I was here. But I know that today is the day I will die. Outside the door was a swarm of sword-wielding soldiers, and escape was impossible. Mother. Xiao Fei came out from the inner room and held my hand. Who is this uncle? I subconsciously wanted to cover Xiao Fei's face, but it was too late. Wei Yuanka's expression changed, and he squatted down and asked Xiao Fei, "What's your name?" Xiao Fei said, "My name is Xiao Fei." "What about your daimyo?" Xiao Fei looked up and asked me, "Mother, what is a big name?" I didn't say anything. Qion Yan immediately knelt down and said, "Your Majesty, Xiao Fei hasn't been given a formal name yet." Wei Yuanka said, "Didn't you give me the money, or did you not want to take it?" Qion Yan didn't dare to answer. Wei Yuanka sneered and asked Zhao Jiu to carry Xiao Fei out. The soldiers also took Qion Yan, Chun Yao, and the others outside. He and I were the only ones left in the cloth shop. He walked around the store and then went upstairs. The moment before he pushed open my bedroom door, I knelt down and said, "This is all my idea. I'll let you do whatever you want. Just let Qion Yan and Chun Yao go." He half knelt in front of me and asked me word by word, "So, what did I do wrong that you wanted to lie to me?" I looked up and said, "You are from the north, I am from the south. We were born wrong." The fault between him and me was not that he used me as a substitute, nor that I tricked him into escaping. Rather, what separates us are countries, hatred, and enmity. Although we did not cause all this, we are the ones who bear the consequences. Northerner? Southerner? He suddenly became emotional. "You are lying. This is not a reason at all. You really took the Queen Mother's poison. Why would you rather die than leave me?" After saying this, he hit the door with his palm, and it fell down. He saw the 3 memorial tablets I had placed on the table. My mother's, 4th brother's, and Nanha's. This is the hatred between countries. Wei Yuanka was stunned for a moment and wanted to smash Nanha's memorial tablet and urn. I tried desperately to grab them, and we fought each other. Nanha's spirit tablet was smashed by him, and I bit his tiger's mouth. Anyway, I was a dying man, so I was not afraid. He pushed me away with force, and I pulled him down onto the bed. His eyes darkened, and he reached out to tear off my clothes. As his hands touched my skin, I told him, "Because you don't look like him." He paused. "What did you say?" I stroked his eyebrows and said, Has no one ever told you before that your eyes are very similar to Munanha's? But then you got a scar on your brow bone, and it no longer looks like that. Looking at his shocked eyes, I felt a sense of success in my heart. I put my hand into his shirt, along his chest to his waist and abdomen, and then down, just like when I was a demon concubine and tried to please him. I whispered softly in his ear, "Your Majesty, you can do whatever you want to me, as long as you release Qiu Nian and the others." I was telling him that every time I was intimate with him, it was for a purpose. He stared at me solemnly, with anger, scrutiny, suspicion, and confusion, until he pushed me away, stood up, and left. I slowly sat up from the bed, wiped the tears from my face, tidied my clothes, and put Nanha's tablet back to its original place. After a while, a small figure pushed open the door and walked in, came to my side, and sat quietly next to me. I looked at him. I wasn't nice to him, so why did he always stick to me? "I don't like you at all. Why don't you hate me?" I asked him. He raised his head and looked at me with clear eyes. "Because I like mother."
16.
Wei Yuanka didn't kill me in the end. Xiaofei, Qiu fourth brothers twins, and I were all taken back to the Zhou dynasty. Chen Yao and the others were left there and were never allowed to leave Donglu Island. On the boat back, Zhao Jiu said that Wei Yuanka discovered that the female corpse was not me shortly after my death. He realized I had escaped the first time and immediately sent people to look for me. But some of those people thought he was crazy, and some thought that even if I was alive, I shouldn't come back, so they didn't do things seriously. It wasn't until last month that he received a secret letter telling him where I was. Qiu Nian knelt down in front of me and admitted that she had written the secret letter. "Princess, I'm sorry. I just missed your Majesty too much. One man's panacea is another's poison. The princess considers your Majesty an enemy, but in my heart, he is a real man." It turned out that she fell in love with Wei Yuanka. So she advised me not to have an abortion, and said in front of me that Wei Yuanka was magnanimous and loved Xiaofei as his own child, saying that he was a noble man with slow words. For the sake of Southern Jin, I have sacrificed 5 years, and then served the princess for another 3 years. I have told myself countless times to forget your Majesty, serve the princess well, and be loyal to her. However, I cannot forget, not even a little bit. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I raised my hand high, but in the end I didn't let it fall. She didn't do anything wrong. As she said, she never enjoyed the support of the people of Southern Jin, but she was the one who borne all the hardships. But I am the same. Although she had the title of princess, she only enjoyed the honor of a princess for one day, when she went north to marry the emperor. From now on, water and fire will blend together. 17. After returning to northern Zhou, Wei Yuanka gave me a new identity to enter the palace. I was conferred the title of 5th rank consort, and Wei Yuanka also gave Xiaofei a name, Wei Heng. The court officials knew that I was Li Shuiwei, but they no longer dared to issue warnings to execute me every day as they did before, because those people had already been dealt with by Wei Yuanka. Qiu Nian was named a beauty. On the day she was named a beauty, she knelt in front of me and kowtowed 3 times. "Thank you, Your Majesty, for your help." I went to see the Queen Mother, but she was already ill and would soon die. Xiaofei knelt in front of her and called her Grandma Huang in a baby voice. She held Xiaofei's hand and sighed. Forget it. I can't do anything about it anymore." When I returned to the dormitory, Li Zhaoning was already waiting for me. She looked much more haggard, and the palace servant said that she had not had a good life in the past 3 years. After I left, she became the target of attack by the northerners. Although Wei Yuanka protected her, he also took this opportunity to clean up a large number of southerners who opposed him. She also became the target of criticism from the southern dynasty. Li Zhaoning swung on the swing in my palace. "To be honest, I can't see Your Majesty clearly. When he was young, he hated me to the core, but once he recovered from a cold, he became a different person and couldn't live without me. Then I was really next to him, but he didn't touch me. He is like this, and so is Mu Nanha. They both try their best to get close to me, but they don't cherish me. The swing stopped and she came to my side. I just want to be a princess who eats well, drinks well, plays well, and sleeps well. Why does fate treat me like this? I replied to her, if you hadn't betrayed fourth brother and Nanha, you would be a princess who eats well, drinks well, plays well, and sleeps well now. She smiled and said, I don't regret it. If fate comes again, I will still let you marry in my place and report my fourth brother and Munanha, because that is my best choice at the moment. Finally, she stroked my face and looked at me carefully. We're sisters. We really look alike. That evening, she wore the most formal attire of a southern Jin princess and leapt onto the city wall under the setting sun. When I arrived, her body was already cold. 3 years ago, she was threatening to jump over the wall here, but was eventually persuaded to do so. 3 years later, she came here alone, without looking back. 18. Wei Yuanka buried her with great honor as the princess of southern Jin, and we went to see her off on the day of her burial. On the way back, an old woman chased after our carriage and shouted, Princess, you are back. Have you seen the little wheat and grass of our people? They went north with you. Why didn't they come back? The women made their favorite acacia rice. When will they come back to eat it? She was mad and crazy, so Zhao Jiu immediately asked the soldiers to deal with it. The southerners around her retreated in fear. Fourth brother's twin sons knelt down and pleaded for the old woman. Wei Yuanka's expression froze. The brother and sister are already 10 years old this year. They've taken on the image of their fourth brother. Both of them like to frown and meddle in other people's business. My fourth brother would feel sad even if a beggar fell down because of hunger. He was born to be a worrywart, and he made me worry as well. I pleaded with Wei Yuanka to let the old woman go. That evening, I took the initiative to invite Wei Yuanka to dinner. It has been 3 months since we last visited Donglu Island, and we have hardly seen it. In the end, I ended up becoming Li Xiaoning and found my own way down the stairs. When Wei Yuanka arrived, I asked all the palace maids to leave and served him personally. I knelt down and apologized to him, saying that I shouldn't have deceived him. I pleaded for the twins, hoping that he would let them live. I asked him to send Xiaofei back to me so that I could raise him myself. What can you do for me? He asked me. I leaned forward and touched my forehead to the ground. Your Majesty, I will do whatever you ask me to do. After a long while I heard him say, Li Shuiwe, sometimes I really want to kill you. I stood up and sat on his legs, unbuttoning his clothes with my fingers painted with bright red cardamom. Then please, Your Majesty, you must kill me tonight. 19. After one night, Wei Yuanka and I reconciled. Everyone says that I am the luckiest woman. I have the emperor's favor and can raise children by my side. Xiaonian came to see Xiaofei, and Xiaofei was very happy to see her. The two of them were still the same as before. The palace maids knew that she had been a tribute maiden, and they laughed at her for having a pair of beautiful arms that had been pillowed by thousands of men, and a pair of red lips that had been tasted by tens of thousands of men. It is said that although she was named a beauty, Wei Yuanka had never visited her or even looked at her. Because she is too dirty, who would like dirty things, they laughed. I gave them a cold glance and they immediately fell silent. The days go by one after another. I personally taught Xiaofei how to read and write and invited highly respected teachers from the southern and northern dynasties to teach him. Wei Yuanka would also teach him and take him to ride and shoot. The previous dynasty allowed Wei Yuanka to select concubines to fill the harem and even sent a beautiful woman to be Wei Yuanka's servant. That night, I went to Wei Yuanka's place to make trouble and asked Zhao Jiu to send the woman out of the palace overnight. I also threatened that I would kill anyone who was sent to me in the future. People also scolded me as a jealous woman and said that if Wei Yuanka continued like this, he would have no descendants. I was moving up and down on Wei Yuanka's body. Your Majesty, don't listen to their nonsense. Your Majesty still has Xiaofei, and I am only 27 years old now. I can give birth to children for Your Majesty. I will give birth to as many children as Your Majesty wants. Although I have been unable to have children for a long time, Wei Yuanka just looked at me and said nothing. But I no longer feel guilty. I took the initiative to interlock my fingers with his, leaned over and kissed his lips. Your Majesty, you must trust me. He remained silent. It doesn't matter whether he believes it or not. It's enough for me to be the only one in the harem.
20.
When Xiao Fei was 12 years old, Wei Yuanke made him the crown prince. In the winter of the same year, Wei Yuanke caught that strange cold again. He was in a coma and couldn't drink the medicine made from the roots of the crabapple tree. I thought about it and reached out to pinch his nose, just like my mother taught me when he caught a cold at the age of 15. But he didn't open his mouth, but he opened his eyes. He looked at me in disbelief, breathing rapidly. How did you know about this medicine? I replied, Your Majesty, have you forgotten that when you were sick that year, it was my mother who treated you? I even fed you medicine, and Your Majesty almost bit me to death at that time. He murmured, So it was you. It has always been you. No wonder I couldn't be cruel to you. In fact, I knew it the day Li Xiaoning died. Wei Yuanke had recognized the wrong person. On the day he fell ill, Li Xiaoning also went there. He didn't know me, so he thought that it was Li Xiaoning and my mother who saved him. So his hatred for Li Xiaoning turned into love. Li Xiaoning also figured this out and chose to commit suicide. I didn't say much and fed the medicine to his mouth. Your Majesty, don't think too much. Just drink the medicine. After taking the medicine, he felt better and even went to court. After coming back from court, he had dinner with Xiao Fei and me, and the three of us talked and laughed. After lunch, he held me and said, Xue, take a nap with me. I'm a little tired. I said yes. I lay in his arms, and he said in a daze, Xue, call my name. I listened to his heartbeat. Wei Yuanke. He said, call again.
Wei Yuanke.
He smiled and said, Yeah, I'm here. I felt his body was burning, and his breathing was not right. By the time the imperial physician arrived, he had already fallen asleep forever. At the morning court session that day, he appointed 4 ministers, 2 from the Northern Dynasty and 2 from the Southern Dynasty, and asked them to assist Xiao Fei. Even important matters in the court must be carried out with my approval. He knew he couldn't hold on for much longer. This time, He Tengen failed to save him. 21. I looked at Wei Yuanke lying on the bed. His face was still handsome, as if he was asleep. The military amulet was next to his pillow. He left it for me. I held his hand for a long time, and only after a long time did I realize that a tear had appeared on my face. After hearing the news, Jian Yan came to see him. She looked calm and kowtowed to me 3 times. Then she went back and followed Wei Yuanke. I originally planned to bury her in Wei Yuanke's mausoleum, but later I changed my mind and buried her nearby. Xiao Fei said I should have done so because the emperor could only be buried with the empress. And my father likes you. He won't like other women around him. He also posthumously named Xiao Nian Mother of All Mercy to thank her for her care. When he ascended the throne, he issued a general amnesty, reduced taxes, dismissed the army, and returned slaves to commoners, making the North and the South equal without distinction. He also recalled his 4th brother's twin sons to the court and appointed his 4th brother's son to work in the Ministry of Agriculture, in charge of farming throughout the country. His daughter married a young general from the north, and the couple lived in harmony. I looked at the young emperor in front of me. He was already a qualified person who integrated the north and the south. This child, who cannot be killed even by poison, has his destiny.
22.
I also sent an envoy to Donglu Island to bring Chen Yao and the others back. But Chen Yao said that they had already had children on the island and were living happily, so they would not return. They only let the messenger take back Nanha's ashes. That day, Wei Yuanke only allowed me to take back my mother's and 4th brother's ashes. He threw away Nanha's ashes, and Chen Yao found them again. This time, I did not keep Mu Nanha's ashes with me. I buried him together with my 4th brother. If they have a new life, they should still be good friends and good brothers. When I was 40 years old, Xiao Fei established the queen and appointed 4 concubines. He said that he would not be like Wei Yuanke, who only had me as his woman, and that the harem was closely related to the previous dynasty. I nodded. You are the emperor, you make the decision. He had grown up, and it was time for him to make his own decision. I ended my duties as a judge behind the scenes and watched the sun rise and set in the palace every day. I didn't want to spend my 50th birthday in the palace, so I wandered around the heavenly city incognito. Today, the country is prosperous and the people are well off, with bustling traffic. You can no longer tell north from south, there are only the people of the world. I bought some trinkets for my 2 grandchildren, and as the sun was setting, my attendants urged me to return to the palace. When I left, I heard a woman calling her grandson, Baoju, Chang'an, come back for dinner. We're back, we're back. 2 lively and healthy boys ran past us. Don't be envious, Empress Dowager. You also have grandchildren around you now. Zhao, Ju said with a smile. I said yes, I have my own good life now. Looking back at the desolate place.
Return.
There is no wind or rain and no sunshine.